I've read about something called the likability paradox, which is actually the more successful women are, the less likable on average they're perceived to be. I've also had mansplaining happen to me, which is, you say something and someone else explains it back to you and you're like, hey, I just said that. I had applied to 40 different funds. I think almost every fund that was registered as an investment firm in this country that had more than 2 people employed, I must have reached out to them in some way. And I keep telling people, all you need is one, right? You really just need that one opportunity to go and make things happen.
Thanks, Lavanya, for being on the show with us. Very excited to be talking with you because you have, had most of the degrees that people wish for, one from Wharton and then from Stanford. And not just that, your career has also been into firms where people desire to go. You started at Goldman and you spent more than a decade there, and after that you joined Trifecta as an equity partner. So starting off, I'd like to know that how did you go to Wharton after college?
Thanks, Radhika, first of all, for such a kind introduction and having me on your show. I'm a big fan of yours. So super excited to do this with you. And please don't hold my degrees against me. In a world where young people don't even know if they want to go to college, I think I'm dating myself with my academic background. But you asked me how I started my career, and maybe I can talk a little bit about the arc of my journey. I grew up in Bangalore in a Tamilian Brahmin family where education was really the only salvation. I started out wanting to maybe be a writer. But then my parents said, you can do that after you get a degree where you can be independent. And so I said, okay. And I started studying economics and finance and really fell in love. And I think it was a combination of my nerdiness and my passion that got me to Wharton. I was super, I couldn't believe it when I saw that first offer letter. I think sometimes you just need that first door to open to then really change the trajectory of your career and your life.
How the application process was?
Yes, I do. So I actually wanted to go study economics at Cambridge, and I had gotten in because the UK admissions process is a little bit earlier than the US one. And I was so excited. I thought that's what I was going to do. I was going to be an economist. I was going to study at Cambridge. And a family friend just happened to be at home, and he told my father, your daughter seems like a jhola wearing type. So you should not send her to the UK to study socialist economics. You should send her to the US. So she can be a true blunt capitalist. And my father said, okay, why don't you apply? And I was looking at them like, do you guys even know how much effort I had to put in to get accepted to Cambridge? But to satisfy my father's request, I just applied. I applied on the last day, which is normally not how I am. I'm very prepared, I'm very organized. But since this was, a last minute suggestion, I did it on the last day. And forgot about it. I bought my woolen clothes. I was going to Cambridge. And then this offer letter came really late. It came in like July, and I was supposed to leave in August. And I guess then there was a slight change of plans because the more people I spoke to, the more I felt like studying in America would potentially be a nicer career trajectory. And so that is how.
So you didn't want to study in India at all?
It's a good question given how much I love this country and given I came back after aggregating all these degrees. I felt like the Indian system and I studied in the late 90s and the early 2000s in this education system. I felt, for example, in Indian economics, we were learning about nationalization of banks when liberalization had already happened. So I felt the curriculum at that time, and I know a lot of this has changed with IB and the updation of even the Indian boards. I just felt Indian education at the time felt like it was in a time warp for the liberal arts. And I didn't want to be studying what happened 50 years ago. I wanted to be studying what was happening, so that I could contribute to the future in some small way. And so that desire of mine to learn in an environment that was very agile to the current environment was completely fulfilled at Wharton. So for example, we had a professor called Sulalas who taught us macroeconomic theory, a really fine mind. He used to run out of the classroom to go check what the FOMC had said about the Fed fund rates and then come back and tell us. And then we would discuss what would happen the next day in the markets, right? And so I felt like the pedagogy was extremely different. And I instinctively craved it from the conversations I'd had with students who had preceded me. But I truly loved it when I was there.
Any fond memory that you have from your Wharton days? Any challenging times that you had to overcome?
Absolutely. You know, there were many challenges. I remember this one time we were stuck on a finance case, and it was 4 of us from all different parts of the world trying to crack this case. And then finally everyone said, you know what, let's just set this aside, go eat an Indian buffet. So there's this Chinese guy, this Canadian guy, a girl from Philadelphia, and me. And so the 4 of us went, and were students, right? So you spend $4.99, you eat for like 3 hours. So we did that, we came back, 2 of them fell asleep and 2 of us cracked the case. And then they woke up and they were like, great, see, we knew this was the answer. So that's one of my fun memories from a real grind. I was working all the time, joyfully of course, but it was very competitive and it was very hard to do well there.
And how did you choose to do economics? Did you have a career trajectory in mind after your 12th when you were applying at Wharton?
As you know, I wanted to study English literature, so I'd be lying if I said I had a very well thought out path. But my mother worked in finance. My parents met at IIM Bangalore, where my mother was one of 5 women. So I think the fact that she had blazed a trail definitely had its impact on me. I think sometimes, life laughs at you, right? In the early part of my life, I said I never want to have, a high-powered career because she's always so busy. But then I ended up sort of inadvertently being, a total follower in her footsteps. So I think the finance path, and maybe even the finance gene, was bequeathed to me by my mom. But I think the path from Wharton to Wall Street was again like serendipity, like many other things in my life. It was day 0 and Goldman Sachs was supposed to come to campus, and everybody obviously was super nervous and super excited for these interviews. We'd all made our resumes, we'd all been selected, super excited. And I was also nervous because I had been in the US for the first time. It had only been a few months. It was summer internship recruiting. And the snow day that got called that day meant Goldman got moved to day 3. And so there was a crazy rejuggling of schedules. Local firms came instead on day 0. And by day 3, I'd had so much interview practice that I think I ended up doing well on that interview and getting an internship at Goldman Sachs.
How was the interview process?
Very rigorous. So they'd ask you a bunch of quantitative questions. You had to quickly respond, and then if they were satisfied with that, then someone would do a more behavioral, but also trying to quiz you on various financial concepts. And then there was like a super day in New York where you would meet back to back 12 to 15 people depending on how lucky you were. And then they decide at the end of that day whether to give you an offer.
So did you have like 10 rounds of interview? I mean, people have that these days.
Absolutely. Many rounds. Many rounds.
Wow, it sounds very tedious but exciting also for those who really want to do this. But once you got in, how was the experience as a fresher in a big company like Goldman, that too in a different city and country?
I think that was the summer all my dreams came true. I still refer to the summer of 2003 as that. I got this internship at Goldman. I showed up, and I told you, right, I had a very normal, relatively modest upbringing.
Right.
We never wanted for anything. There was always, money to buy books. There was money to do a little budget travel, but there was never surplus. And so I had my shoes from Payless. I had my $12 suit. And I showed up, and I was really nervous because I felt, wow, there's people from all over the world vying for these positions, and I've got one of these, but what happens now, right? And I think I quickly realized that hard work is like a great equalizer at entry level, at least. I felt like very quickly people would react very positively to my enthusiasm and my effort. And I was always, I think, a safe pair of hands. So if you gave me a piece of work, I would do it. I would stay till 2, 3, 4 in the morning whenever it had to get done, and I would do it cheerfully. So I felt like actually the adjustment into this new culture and this new system was way smoother than I had anticipated. And I also think in some ways, sometimes it's hard to be different, sometimes it's actually easy. I was the only immigrant in that team of investment banking at the time. It was the real estate vertical within investment banking. And everybody was curious about me. They were like, how did you end up here? Where are you from?
Why were they so curious?
I think because at the time, the stereotypical Indian immigrant was an engineer, right? And not like an investment banker on Wall Street. I know now there have been enough examples of people who've, climbed very high, but, over 15 years ago, that wasn't as common. And so everyone was like, how did you end up here? And you have such a strong accent. I spoke like this then, I speak like this now. But I think there were two things that worked in my favor apart from my work ethic. It was also that I just really loved what I was doing. And so I think now as a partner in a fund, I think we rely on our freshers to give us the energy and enthusiasm to grind through the tough times. Because I think, you've seen business cycles, you've seen the good, the bad and the ugly. You sometimes need that infusion of enthusiasm in the team, a fresh pair of eyes to look at problems differently. Also just a pulse on the changes that are happening in the world, right? And I guess inadvertently, the new analyst class, of which I was a part, did that. And so it was absolute joy. It was great fun.
Any challenging project that you remember you did while interning at Goldman?
Absolutely. So I remember we were refinancing a large loan on Rockefeller Center. And Rockefeller Center is this iconic New York building that everybody knows, and I was so proud to be working on it, and it was bid out widely to a bunch of different lenders, and we were the advisor on that transaction. And I think that was like a day and night grind to the point where when we finally printed the prospectus or finally gave the go on the prospectus, it went off to the printers. And I just went to the restroom, and our restroom had a little couch, like half the size of this literally. And the women's restroom had like 2-3 people using it, so it would usually be empty, right? So I just thought, let me just take a quick nap. I had not slept, I think, for like 32 or 33 hours at this point. So I just thought I'd take a quick nap. And I woke up like 6 hours later in the middle of the night, and my whole team thought I had died. They were like, we think we've killed Lav because she's nowhere. And they obviously didn't think of looking for me in the women's restroom, right? And all my stuff was in the cube. So my bag was there, my cell phone was there. So everybody was looking for me in the building.
Oh God.
So that was one very challenging, but also really fun transaction.
But I always wonder, how do you not sleep for more than 24 hours? How do you keep yourself alive?
I don't know. As a 40-year-old, it's harder, let me tell you. But if you're a twin mom like I have done that also for 3 more years as a 35-year-old. So.
Understood. But you were having quite a nice time while at Goldman. You got hired also. Did they give you a PPO basis which you got hired?
Yes.
And on basis of what did they give you? Did you do a deal which they liked?
So So I was an analyst, like I said, so I worked on whatever they wanted me to work on, right? I think I may have potentially outworked everybody. In fact, there were other summer analysts with me who'd be like, why don't you do my model also, and then I'll go get all of us food because you seem to really love doing this, because we had like history majors, we had political science majors all come in for that internship, right? And I think because I was studying finance and economics, I had in that sense a lot more familiarity.
But how did they get hired if they were from the history background?
Because people can quickly pick up finance, right? I think this is something I genuinely feel, and I'm not saying it, you know, just to be humble or just to say it. I think truly what we do is not rocket science. I think anybody with a basic interest in numbers and business will very easily be able to do.
Yeah, good you said that, because that's a myth around finance, that it's very difficult.
Yeah, I know.
But coming back to my question as to you were having a good time at Goldman, then what really triggered you to go to Stanford for an MBA and level up? Yeah,
I'm glad you at least think of it as leveling up. My parents were wondering why I would leave Goldman, because actually on the way to Stanford I went to a hedge fund for 2 years. So I went from 30,000 person firm Goldman to a 10-person hedge fund called SPO Partners, which did not have a website. And so my parents were like, does this firm even exist? Like, what do they do? Why are you going there? Who leaves Goldman Sachs? So like every other investment banking analyst in my era, which was, I was there at Goldman on Wall Street from 04 to 06, everyone was looking to move into investing. And at the time there were different styles. There was private equity investing, which is more New York and Boston, DC centric, so that tri-state area. And then there was hedge fund land and venture capital land. Venture capital was still young, but hedge fund land, which, you know, there was a big presence on the West Coast in addition to, of course, New York. And I met this fund called SPO Partners. They had a super flexible strategy. They could do private, they could do public. They had very long-term capital. It was basically evergreen money. The founding partners had at the time been investing together for 26 years. And they had over a 30% IRR for that track record. And I was like, wow, I get to learn from people who've done this for 2.5 decades. And the 3 guys, the SPNO of SPO Partners, were all still at the time the investment committee. And so I said, this sounds amazing. I'll get this, you know, apprenticeship. They came to recruit from, you know, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, Citi. So they would reach out to analysts from the class. So they just reached out to me. And I had...
How many rounds there for interview?
6. They were a small firm, right? So of which 4 were like junior associates and 6 were senior people. So I had interviews with all 6 of the senior people at the firm. And that, I think that was really the beginning of my love for investing, and this journey of taking disparate bits of information, organizing it into a narrative, and then trying to make an investment that will over a long period of time yield value. So I think that's where that apprenticeship started.
But picking up from what you said, that at the hedge fund your love for finance really came out in real sense. So do you like suggest people working in smaller, leaner teams to get that understanding of what they're doing, rather than, you know, working in larger teams where they just get to do what they have been told to?
You know, it's a good question. I think sometimes the sequencing of those varies based on your career path. So I think for me, I was an immigrant in that country. SPO Partners would not have been able to take me in and train me and process my H-1B visa without knowing that I was a safe pair of hands. Right? So I feel the 2-year Goldman boot camp, which gave me all the rigorous like analytical training, as well as just the endurance to see a deal through. Right? Like I told you, I like finally fell asleep in the restroom by accident. I feel some of those experiences cannot be replicated really in a small team with you know, no machinery to train.
Correct.
Right? So I think in my case, that experience sequence could not have been reversed because this opportunity would not have been available to me.
Right.
To join a small team and sort of learn that way. But I think depending on everyone's situation, the market they're in, the opportunities that are available to them, I think both experiences have been incredibly valuable to me. The learning to compete in a 30,000 person firm where truly you're all peer benchmark, right? You have to be sort of the best you can be among a very select set of peers who have also demonstrated excellence everywhere they've been. So competing in that environment, I think, gives you a certain set of skills. And then being in a small team where you get to learn directly from the people who've been doing this for 26 years together is a whole different set of skills and experiences.
You're right. I mean, it really gives you that rigorous training required to work in smaller teams because they don't expect you to get trained under them. They expect you to come with certain sense of, skill sets that you can give them. But like you told me that your parents were also wondering why you would want to, quit everything and then go back to study. So what was the really deciding factor?
That was really my fork in the road because sometimes when you find what you're excited to do, do you really need to go and study again? Is a question a lot of young people today ask me, right? Do you need an MBA? Does it help? I think for me the fork in the road then was, do I keep staying in America where I've been having a great time and truly it was a dream run. I mean, I'm so grateful to that country for the opportunities it afforded me. I feel skills in the world are distributed equally, but opportunities are not, and I really feel so fortunate to have received those. I think it was the decision to come back home that finally prompted the MBA. Because at the time, and this was when I was making the decision, it was 2007. I started the MBA in 2008. I felt like India was still a market that prized higher education and definitely like a master's degree was a must. It felt like at the time. I know times have changed. Like my current AVP is like a brilliant boy from IIT Bombay and he didn't want an MBA and I didn't feel he needed one to do a really good job as an investor. So I think it's different in some situations and cases now. But at the time I felt it would really give me the sort of edge I needed to come back here and compete.
Okay, and why did you want to come back to India if Wall Street was so...
So, it's funny. I thought I would go there, study and come back. I didn't know that Wall Street would have a place for me. So the base case always was, I'll go to the US, I'll get this degree and I'll come back home. I've always just loved India. I still do deeply. And I was also in a long distance relationship with my now husband for all the years I was in America. So at some point, I wanted to come back anyway. We wanted to build a life here. But I was, like I said, I was privileged to get these chances to skill myself, to learn more. So it was almost like I kept extending my stay by, a couple of years at a time with each, exciting new opportunity. But when we decided finally that we're going to get married and we're going to build a life here, I applied for the MBA knowing that this would be my last my last tour of the beautiful West Coast.
Got it. And how did you get into Stanford? Did you have to again study for 12-14 hours like you?
Yes. I had to study very hard for the GMAT. Because also you are so busy in the weeds of Excel and annual reports and business models that things like quantitative reasoning and reading comprehension and logic are all like a little bit far from your day to day. So that was my night shift. I'm like, I have to do this. But it was given I had been in the US for so long by that point, I feel I was much more confident in that phase of my academic life. I experimented much more with very difficult classes. I was much less worried about failure. My own risk curve had changed. At Wharton, I would just like be nervous if I got anything less than an A on a single test. At Stanford, I felt I'm here for the learning. I was less paranoid about, you know, the final grade on every test. So I had also grown up a little bit.
Yeah, that's what exposure gives you.
Yeah.
But once you came back in India, you again joined Goldman.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So first of all, I'm so grateful to Goldman for giving me my second big tour of duty, which lasted a decade. So it worked out well for them and me, hopefully. I was in business school as the world was melting down. Right, 2008 to 10 was when Bear Stearns crashed, Lehman crashed, and the global financial crisis was spreading. And jobs were the furthest thing from employers, as in adding jobs. Reducing them was top of mind. And so, and I wanted to switch countries, right? Like I said, I wanted to come back here, and here also people were not hiring. I think the fact that I was a good little analyst in New York helped me, you know, get this job in Goldman in the growth equity investing team in Mumbai. They had all my old records from the time I was a summer analyst. So I think all that really helped.
And where else had you applied?
I had applied to 40 different funds. I think almost every fund that was registered as an investment firm in this country that had more than 2 people employed, I must have reached out to them in some way. And I keep telling people, all you need is one, right? You really just need that one opportunity to go and make things happen. And I've been fortunate to get that one.
So out of 40, how many had responded to you?
You know, almost everybody responded. They were nice.
Given your
but nobody else was hiring. Goldman also was not hiring. It so happened that somebody left and created a vacancy to go run a family business. And so it just
my God, that's aligned. Quite a serendipity.
Yes. I am very lucky. I really am.
I love the way how you're admitting it.
No, it's true because you know, we're in a tough time now as well, right? And so many business school students reach out to me to say, you know, can you help me with recruiting and how should I go about a job search? And I of course give them whatever advice and, you know, introductions I can. But I also tell them, you know, you just need one, so just keep the faith.
But I think hard work also really helps, given the fact that you applied at all the opportunities you had.
I totally. I think that's one thing. I think it's a true gift my parents have given me, which is, you know, over prepare. And my dad, I know I spoke a lot about my mom. You know, my dad always says the harder you work, the luckier you get. So I grew up hearing that a lot. And you sort of create your own, you know, opportunities for luck to shine on you in a sense. I guess if you're prepared.
So when you say you're lucky, that's a modest way of saying I'm very hardworking.
No, but true luck as well has played a huge role in my life.
Where else has it played after Goldman?
You know, interestingly, this opportunity at Trifecta was a product of my former boss talking to my current partners casually, and then just saying, hey, we're going to set up an equity fund, we're looking for somebody who might be a good fit to come set it up with us. And my former boss said, I think I have the person for you, but she's been at Goldman too long, so she may not come, but you should talk to her. So again, pure luck, right? And I get the chance to like run my own fund in the most exciting investing market the world has at the moment. That is very
Had it
lucky.
not been for Trifecta, would you have continued at Goldman?
You know, I was very happy there. So a lot of people would laugh that I was part of the furniture there. You know, our former global CEO, Lloyd Blankfein, once famously said he would die at his desk. And people would tease me that India office mate, there's a candidate for this lab. is a high probability candidate, because I just love being there. I love my work. I was there for 10 years. Most of my business school classmates, Radhika, had changed at least 3 jobs.
Okay.
I was still there.
Yeah, people still change jobs.
Yeah, I was really having a great time.
Yeah, but what was it really that made you enjoy your work?
I've called myself this before. I think my job involves, at its essence, cheering other people on to achieve their dreams and giving them capital, right? Because ultimately it's the entrepreneurs who make the magic happen.
Correct.
And I think for me, being able to bring the capital that they need for that impact to go and build is truly what gives me the most excitement. My successful founders are my friends. The founders whose plans didn't work out the way we would have all liked are still very close to me. I feel being that sort of catalyst and that bridge between capital and ideas, that's truly my happy place. I love it.
Did you ever feel like being an entrepreneur yourself?
I think this journey with Trifecta is as close to entrepreneurship as it gets for me. I've seen what founders go through, and I have the deepest respect for it. And I think the reason I haven't thought of that for myself is because I don't have that one burning idea that I feel this doesn't exist in the world and I have to go create it. But who knows? Life is long.
Correct.
And these days we're all living till we're 90 and we need like 3rd, 4th and 5th careers, right?
Yeah, I mean, people like you are funding such companies which, really prolongs your age. I'm sure.
Good one.
But coming back to your stint at Goldman, you're in India. How did you decide that private equity is the team that I would like to work with? Because again, there are so many divisions within that firm itself that you tend to get lost sometimes that which area will be the best for me.
Absolutely. And I was also fortunate that I had 2 different sets of experiences with Goldman and with SPO. And this Goldman team in India gave me, in some sense, the best of both. It was a small team. There were only 2 people when I joined. Like I said, someone quit. So I was like the 3rd person, right? So I was employee number 3.
In Goldman India?
In the private equity team, the growth equity team. So I was employee number 3. And it also gave me the umbrella of an institution that had money, that had institutional experience that I could rely on to go and build in a new market. So I think in a lot of ways I got the feel of being in a small team that I'd really come to enjoy. When you're part of a 10-person team at SPO, the impact of your work is very immediate, right? And it's very exciting. So I got that, but I also got this air cover of being part of Goldman, which I thought was wonderful for the phase of evolution the Indian private markets were at. And how I decided on private equity specifically was at SPO. I was exposed to the public side and the private side. I felt there was more business building happening on the private side. While the public side was also interesting, it felt more monastic. Like it's you and a Bloomberg terminal and you decide what to invest in, right?
Correct.
I felt this was more exciting to me, to work with founders.
You get to see the value creation happening from day one in private companies, so it of course is more exciting. But then how does one progress in their journey, especially while working in an investment bank like Goldman?
Goldman was very good about giving people multiple rotational opportunities. So I think they had so they put the firm above any one division or individual always. And that has, its benefits and it has its pitfalls, because I think there are some people who are superstars and want to be recognized as such. But Goldman was always, team oriented. They're like, we want everyone to overachieve, but we want you to overachieve as a collective. So you have to subordinate whatever it is you want to do to the interest of the broader firm, which I think is why they've been so successful for so long. And I think they didn't want to lose talent, right? So if you did a great job in technology but you wanted to work in investment banking, and you had like top ratings, they would allow that.
Okay.
So I think the ability to change roles, and I think this comes down a bit as you rise in your career, because then the skills you need are very specific.
Yeah.
And you need a sort of ramp up to really be successful as a senior person in certain divisions.
Yeah.
But broadly, there was a lot of encouragement of rotation.
Yeah, and if you could just tell us, how did you move from being an associate to then vice president and director? How does it really happen for somebody who wants to have a path like yours?
I think in each firm, you need a sort of a mentor, sponsor, somebody who helps you navigate, especially in larger firms where there's complex machinery at play. I think I was fortunate with my bosses. There was a gentleman called Sanjeev Mehra who was, when he was my big boss, the senior most Indian at Goldman Sachs globally.
Yeah.
So he was a really senior gentleman.
And he was your mentor?
So he was 3 levels my boss, but he and I worked directly on 2-3 investments because he was super interested in India. He grew up in Delhi, he went to Doon School.
Yeah.
And so he was India's godfather. And the India team had 3 people. And I was one of the 3. So I ended up working directly with him as an associate right out of business school on a few transactions. And I feel having people like that as role models, even though it wasn't like he and I did a lot of one-on-one mentoring, but just the ability to observe at close quarters how he operated. The level of excellence, the level of preparation, the ability to have a deep dialogue with the founder, tough conversations, the way he would look at a piece of analysis and 3 numbers would seem off to him and it would just jump out at him because of years of excellence and training. I felt like it was having people like him, my other immediate boss Ankur Sahu, who took over about a year after I came in, as the India head and then became co-head of Asia. He had done the most profitable deal in Goldman's private investing history in Japan, which is not a growing market.
Which was that deal?
Universal Studios Japan.
Okay.
So having people like that to learn from, I think really helped me sort of keep my eyes on how do you progress as an investor. And of course there's quantitative metrics, right? There's your reviews, there's how many deals you did, how many deals you sourced, how much you're supporting, other people's deals. Like I said, Goldman has this big sort of one firm focus and emphasis. But I think I was fortunate in the people I had to look up to at very close quarters.
So what were some of the top 3 qualities, if I had to ask you, that you took from him and have imbibed in yourself till date?
Great question. So I'll tell you 3 from 3 different bosses at Goldman. So I think from Sanjeev Mehra, the attention to detail while keeping the big picture in mind was just exceptional. He would know like the footnote in the memo that was important or in the annual report that was important. He would also at all times be able to zoom out and see. So the ability to operate at both levels I thought was just phenomenal. Like he would be able to open Excel and sit with you. He would also be able to, zoom out immediately and say, but what does this mean?
Correct.
As opposed to, we'd all be like deeply in the weeds.
Not getting lost in the details.
Yeah, he'd be able to do both. Like be in the details but not, like you said, get lost in them. Right, so that I really
Did you ever
admire.
ask him how does he do that?
I think, good question. I never actually asked him, Sanjeev, how do you do this? But I would often just closely watch how he would first imbibe information and then respond to it. The kinds of analyses he would ask for, the kinds of questions he would ask to extract the information he was seeking. So I was a student quietly of how he would operate. And then Ankur had a brilliant way of taking a lot of information, distilling it to its core truth, and then taking a bold decision on imprecise information. Because in this market, right, one thing you always struggle with is imprecise information, right? Especially in the private markets where disclosure requirements are not as stringent as those in the public markets. Often market sizing would be like ad hoc, back of the envelope. you wouldn't have like a published report from McKinsey for every sub-segment you were looking at. But his ability to take large amounts of information and then form a point of view in a very strong and sort of high conviction manner, I really admired. And then Vishal Bakshi, who was my MD and also I looked up to a lot, I felt was just incredible at like hustling. He, even though he'd been doing this at the time for 20 years, was super passionate, had to be in every deal, so competitive. And I think that desire to win was something I really admired about him. I just felt he woke up every morning and he's like, I'm going to kill it today. And
not worrying about the external world market.
Yeah, it's like, that's fine. I'm going to kill it today. So I thought it was fantastic. Really, really great attitude to going and sort of.
Isn't that desire really required for every one of us to succeed?
I think so.
Yeah, but not everyone has it.
I think so.
Yeah, but which was your one of the first deals that you sourced? Because you told me that is also one of the deciding factors for you to move up the ladder.
Yeah. So there was this company that was doing fertility in a distributed format with smaller centers called Nova. And at the time, infertility was not such a talked about topic. This company at the time only had 2 centers on the fertility side. They also had a short stay surgery business. But I feel empathized with the potential of a fertility business in this country. Because I had seen coming from the US that infertility was a growing problem. I had seen among slightly older women friends of mine that a lot of people were suffering. In India, it was still not as talked about. It was partially taboo, partially. I was just a little younger, and so I hadn't yet, reached that phase in life where everybody is sort of building a family. But I think I instinctively saw the power of that, and so I connected with the CFO, who was a former portfolio company CFO. And so I got us into that deal. So that was my first deal.
And where did you read about them in the first place?
I actually saw that this CFO had moved. And then I read about what he was doing on their website. I was just curious. I was like, where is he going? Why is he leaving the TVS group? It is such a good.
And did Goldman happen to make the investment?
Yes, we did. And then finally sold it to a TPG portfolio company, AHH.
Oh wow! So that deal was led by you in a way. Got it. And from there on, series of deals came in?
Yeah, but I will say that the cadence of deal activity in the private markets is maybe 1 deal a year or 2 deals a year, right? Because we do largish deals and we make smaller number of commitments. At Trifecta now, since I joined 2 years ago, we've done 10 transactions and we will announce our 11th one. So the pace of deal activity, because we're an Indian fund, we're agile, we've been tracking these markets for 15 years, we had a good sense of the kinds of companies we had to go after. The deal velocity is just very different. So I think almost I've done, as many deals in the last 2 years as I have in the previous 10.
Right. And which was one of the deals that I remember you have spoken to me in one of our conversations that made you really become the MD of the private equity in India? So we had invested in TVS Logistics. TVS was at the time thinking of hiving off its non-core assets, and logistics was non-core to some of the other things the group was doing. But a very dynamic entrepreneurial family member called Dinesh said he will separately capitalize it with external capital and grow it independently. He didn't want it to continue to be a captive for the TVS group. And so Dinesh had the foresight that logistics would become an incredibly important enabler of economic growth, and this was in 2008 that Goldman first made the investment. And then once I came on board, we made a follow-on investments. We put more money into the company,
and the company scaled almost 10x in the 7 years we were invested with them. Incredibly, agile executors, and it was time for us to say goodbye. We had reached sort of our 7-year investment horizon, and CDPQ was very interested in our stake, and they were looking to make their first India private investment. So that deal took about 7 months, and I was pregnant at the time with twins, and was very ill for a lot of that. But day and night was working to get this exit done. It was going to be a very profitable exit for Goldman. And I literally signed it on October 19th. The person above me on the transaction had since left. The person below me had left. So I was sort of alone and a little bit scared. And I signed it on October 19th. My due date was end of the month. So I thought I had some time. In the same month, October? Actually, it was November 14th, but my gynaec had said twins come early. So end October is probably the due date, not... Now, I'm one of those classic, November 14th due date people. They say, right, Children's Day is like 9 months after Valentine's Day. But the kids came on the 20th. They were born like literally on the next day. Oh my after God. Signing this transaction. And then I got promoted in the immediate next MD cycle. So the CEO of TVS jokes, he'll say, Lavanya delivered my deal before she delivered her children. So I think that was the deal that helped me sort of climb that rung of the ladder.
So did you inquire with CDPQ since you knew that?
No. That was not me. We had a banker running that process. So Kotak was the banker that was dealing with a bunch of investors who were interested. Ultimately, CDPQ was most interested. And so they were the banker. But we were front running a lot of the process because it was secondary, right? It was not fresh money into the company. It was.
And who really promoted you? Who was your mentor?
Ankur Sahu, one of the 3 people I mentioned. Got it. Was by then Sanjeev Mehra had retired.
And since we're talking about sourcing of the deals, which was one of the most difficult deals to get, where you had high conviction, but you had to really convince the other person.
So I can tell you about one at Trifecta. So do you know Country Delight, the company that does a lot of fresh to home products? So I was a loyal consumer, and so I knew that their doodh quality is exceptional. And then they were doing other dairy products. It started doing some fruit and vegetable, and so I was familiar with the brand as a consumer and a big fan. And I heard there was a likely fundraise happening.
How do you get to hear all of this?
So this Avendus was running the fundraise, and Avendus is close to us because we work together on multiple transactions. But they told us this will be very competitive. So we worked day and night to very quickly express our interest with informed views and informed work to be sort of ahead of the curve on expressing interest to the founder to ultimately be part of that consortium. But many big investors finally joined that round, but they continued to allow us to remain because we were very early and very sort of high conviction exhibitors of interest. So it was very competitive though.
Wow. Who else was there?
So ultimately the deal went to Venturi, us and Temasek as a consortium.
And how do founders really decide that which investor to give the money?
You should ask the founders that. Definitely not good looks.
Although that can be a propelling factor. With this I love listening to these stories. It really gives a real sense, perspective of what's happening around. And which was the first deal that you got to Trifecta?
So there was a company called Ixigo that I had met at Goldman, which you may have done a rail booking on them. If you are a rail traveler, these days they're very, good on flights as well. And they've recently made a big foray into buses. So if anybody wants to travel, Ixigo's your app. Little plug for my sweet portfolio company.
Alok will be very happy to hear this.
So I had met Alok when I was at Goldman, And then I met him again when I just joined Trifecta, when we had no fund, by the way. Like I said, I joined to help set up the fund. And Rahul Khanna from Trifecta had given him some venture debt. And he was meeting Alok. So I just joined the meeting just to reconnect with him, since he had come and met me at Goldman. At the time, they were mostly doing meta search. They had not yet become a full-fledged OTA. So I just wanted an update. And then when I saw how capital efficient they were, how big the business had become, how they are the most downloaded app in India for travel, they're in the top 10 globally. I just felt this is like a real diamond. And because travel had been so cyclical and oversold, and there was always Make My Trip as the big gorilla, Ixigo never really did a big funding round. They had raised, at the time we came in, $20+ million alone, and built a business that was 2.5 times that size.
And how many years were they into the business?
At the time, they'd been doing it for 14 years. So they've been around for a long time through many tough funding winters. So super resilient, super capital efficient, great customer experience, cool fintech products, truly building for Bharat. And then I was like, wow, I would love to do this investment, but we don't have a fund. So I introduced him actually to other investors. I was like, hey, this company is amazing, we've given them venture debt, you should talk to them. And I introduced him to, for example, like GIC. Eventually the Singapore arm of GIC invested, but I had made like these introductions because I truly believed that it was an excellent business and founder. And ultimately, when we did raise our fund, he was actually closing out his round. And so we managed to get into that investment. So that was my first transaction at Trifecta.
But if you wouldn't know Alok earlier, they wouldn't allow you to come last minute, right, as an investor?
Actually, to be very fair to that situation, Trifecta and Rahul Khanna had just given him venture debt. And so we had a very current institutional relationship. And one of the reasons we wanted to set up the growth equity fund was exactly for situations like this, where you have a sense for where the founder is taking the business. You have a very clear view of the risks and rewards. You have the ability to be creative capital. And beyond the point, venture debt needs to get repaid, and the company needs to move on to bank or NBFC financing as it scales. And so it has a natural life. Of 3 years is the sort of typical tenure of an instrument. You sometimes do a second loan, so maybe 5-6 years of venture debt relationship, beyond which the company should graduate to bank financing or NBFC financing. And then we felt there are so many founders we know so well who are building amazing businesses. We want equity exposure. So we set up the equity fund to, of course, invest in companies that have no former venture debt history, but also the ones where we know them really well and want to continue to participate in them.
Because with venture debt you might not get a board seat, and you would want to see how it's functioning.
Absolutely.
But that also brings me to a question, since we are talking about venture debt, that what are typical instruments in venture debt by way of which you issue the money to the company?
So you should think of venture debt as there is an interest-bearing instrument on which the rate of interest will be pre-agreed and is typically paid quarterly, and there could be a short period where you do not pay interest because you may be sort of negotiating for a variety of reasons. But typically there is an interest-bearing piece, and then there is some form of equity upside in some cases. The equity upside can take the form of partly paid shares, where you pay up a little bit, and then you will pay up the rest depending on whether you perceive that to be in the money or not at a financing event. Or it is in the form of a right to invest in a future round at the current round's valuation. So the form of that equity upside is negotiated between founder and investor, but there will typically be a pure interest-bearing investment which will behave like classic debt, and this equity piece which will be factored in as future investors think about dilution and their own ownership.
And what's the typical range of the interest rate?
I'd say it depends on the type of business and the risk profile and the stage of maturity, but the blended rate that one would expect for classic venture debt is high teens. So the interest piece could be maybe 14 to 15%, and the balance 2 to 4% could come from equity upside.
Okay, but do you also have deals where there's pure plain debt, like without any equity, just the debt?
There can be.
We all don't do it.
No, sometimes you could have high interest rate debt.
Okay, and that's like 18-90%.
Yeah, because for example, if you think of what a VC is underwriting to, right? A VC wants like in excess of 30% IRR. Right? Whether they get it or not, time will tell. Right? But they underwrite to a high equity IRR, and so if you are in a muted valuation environment like we are now, a lot of founders feel this is very dilution protective to take interest bearing instruments as opposed to dilute for equity in this market. So
but you come at late stage, right? Early stage companies don't avail of debt.
So venture debt comes in early. It comes in alongside venture capital, anywhere from Series A onwards. So it can come in early. But it is typically also collateralized by the brand in case it's a consumer facing business, or the assets of the business. So it will be first lien debt in a lot of cases.
Yeah, but I know it's a bit negative question, and God forbid it shouldn't happen with anyone, but in case the company is not able to pay you the debt, then like you spoke of the collaterals, how do you really seize those assets of company?
Yeah, so I think the way to think of venture debt's role is companion capital to venture capital. So more often than not, it will be 10 to 15% of a full financing round. Right? So equity will be the balance. So it's unlikely to be in a situation where the company needs to be liquidated by the venture debt holders. But should that come about, it will be a proper, court approved process, or it will be a negotiated sale to somebody where the venture debt holders get paid out.
Right. In your experience so far throughout the years while at Goldman also, did you see any companies get?
So I've never been a venture debt investor. But I've seen investments that did really well and investments that did not. But because the equity instrument can by definition be worthless, there is really no court approved process unless you're forcing a liquidation of the business and distributing the proceeds. It will typically be, you get paid cents on the dollar and you all move on in life.
And like you said that not all deals are successful, so which ones get successful? What does it take really from the founder and investor side to make a deal happen?
It's a great question, and I think there's no magic answer.
Right.
Because sometimes, the idea will be great, but the market is not ready. At other times, everything is great, but the funding environment turns, and then, there's this saying that the markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent, right? That can happen. Where you may have a good idea, you may have done everything right, and then the tide turns, and as an entrepreneur, if you run out of money, you run out of money. So I think there's no one reason for success or failure. It's often a combination. But I think the successes I've seen have largely come from the founder being able to build the team, execute with a lot of intensity, and also know when to step back from certain functions and allow the organization to grow and breathe.
Sometimes people are too close to the mirror to see a problem and it's good to move a little bit away and see a 360-degree view, and I think US investors help with that sometimes.
I hope so.
But you mostly come in the late stage companies as an equity investor also. So what differences do you observe really in the early stage founders versus the late stage founders? Like you've known Alok from Ixigo since a long time, so you might really know how his evolution has taken place throughout the years.
I think if you were to generalize how some of these journeys go. There's a phase where you have to just go from 0 to 1. You're just getting off the ground.
Yeah.
And that requires certain multi-dimensional competencies, right? Just the ability to do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
You will have to sell, you will have to be the CFO, you will have to raise the money also. Because at that time there aren't believers yet. You don't yet have your first set of customers, you don't yet have your first set of investors. It's like you and the problem you're trying to solve, and maybe a small team of very early supporters. I think what it takes to go from there, from that 0 to 1 and then that 1 to 5, are a lot of just pure passion for solving this problem, coupled with the ability to get a lot of others to believe and the ability to raise whatever is needed to solve the problem for that stage. But I think as the company now has a life of its own and everything cannot now come to one person as the sole decision maker, the ability to build that org, the ability to say, these are my blind spots and I need talent, this is what I'm not good at, this is what I don't like to do. And then having the ability to build that team, find that trust, while also executing in a dynamic market, right? I remember at one point, I was in a founder conversation and he said, I've made 17 pivots. I said, wow, in 4 years. So I think as the organization scales, if suddenly the market changes, you may have had product market fit at one point, but maybe that goes away now. So I think the ability as you scale to effectively delegate and trust and empower, I think distinguishes some of those great founders from the ones who are always sort of, I wouldn't call them the bottleneck, but the final arbiter of most big decisions, which is very hard.
And is there any reason why we at Trifecta come at a later stage?
We just think the early stage market for equity investing is very well addressed. We think all the big Silicon Valley funds are here, a bunch of really good domestic funds are doing early stage, and as the market matures, we think a similar spurt of funds will happen at this growth for late stage, and we just wanted to be one of the early ones in this space.
Got it. And since you might have heard many pitches as an investor now, do you really spot any difference in the way male entrepreneurs pitch versus female entrepreneurs do?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think because I'm a woman, and maybe I'm sort of conscious of various biases that might exist, I haven't actually seen a material difference when a man pitches to me or a woman pitches to me. Also at the late stage, if you've come to this, Series C growth stage, you've been through so many grinders that you're all sort of all in at this point, and this is, you're doing your life's work. So I don't think I've seen a material difference, but I've read a lot of literature around this, because it's glaring that only 3% of venture capital globally has gone to women. And I think there's a problem on the demand side and the supply side. I think there's not as many women taking the plunge to be entrepreneurs, and there's not as many people funding the ones who do. So I think there's a problem on both sides.
And why do you think do we still have the problem?
I think change takes a long time to actually manifest in numbers. But there are signs of change, and I'll tell you those. Because there are some green shoots, right? And we should acknowledge those. So if you look at entry level in the industry, and BCG just did this study on gender and investing in India, along with WinPE, and they found that 40% of associate level roles in funds in India are now occupied by women. Which is wonderful. It's not 50, but at least it's 40. Right? Which is fantastic. It was single digit when I joined the industry 12 years ago in India. And so I think progress has been made, right, at the entry level and widening the funnel.
Yeah.
Now it takes time for that talent to mature into partner level.
Yeah.
And at partner level, that number is more like 15%, which is not fantastic, but again, better than the last decade. I think in aggregate, that number is somewhere in the mid-20s for representation of women in investing in India. And the ability to keep that 40% who are now coming in all the way, I think needs to improve. And if you think about what those levers are, right, it's one, attracting that talent, which we're doing an okay job of with 40%. We should aspire to over 50, but at least. I think the second aspect is really nurturing that talent in those years where they are up for the next level. The climbing of the ladder, I think, needs different types of sponsorship and mentorship for both men and women. Like everybody needs coaching and mentorship as they navigate the ladder. And I think sometimes the issues women face can be different. And therefore maybe they need different types of support. The third piece is really when there's a big life event, maternity, for example, which I have experienced, is one big life change, which needs a certain type of employer and a certain mentality from the employee to navigate that life change successfully. And then finally, I think there's culture, which is little more amorphous. It's hard to quantify, it's hard to explain, but is culture inclusive? There might be policies, but are people feeling comfortable availing of them, both men and women? Because sometimes if women are the only ones availing the policy, people assume the policy is not for them. And then it is not an inclusive feeling when you are singled out for availing of this policy. So I think these are the dimensions that we can really sort of control and work on as an industry. And I don't think we're by any means perfect. But when I see the new generation, and when I see the confidence, when I see the complete sort of I can be whoever I want to be attitude, it makes me so happy. Because I didn't necessarily think that. I didn't think I deserved a job on Wall Street. I think at every phase of my life I've been delighted and grateful that these opportunities came up, but never did I assume this is easy or possible. But I feel women today believe that, and this is not universal. Again, we live in a complex country with socio-economic differences. There's rural urban differences, so by no means is this a solved problem. But I think there is a high level of aspiration in India today among the women.
And like you mentioned, one of the life-changing episodes is also maternity, and you really require big family support to conquer that while you're doing work, and you've done that successfully. Like you said, that you've delivered your deal right one day before you did your deliver your baby. So how was your family environment, and how has it been throughout the years? That something which people can also learn from, so that if they want to continue doing something, they can.
This is this is a topic very close to my heart, because I feel if more women talk about how much help they took, or how it's okay to ask for help if you feel you're drowning, maybe there will be like less angst and more sort of success. So this is a topic very dear to my heart. I had a lot of help. I continue to have a lot of help from many sources. Starting with a really great piece of advice that a founder gave me. There's this woman in Chennai who was an entrepreneur. I'd gone to meet her. We were discussing her business. It was in the content and entertainment space. And just in a sidebar, she just very casually said, women with leadership qualities just make their spouses inefficient, because they're so efficient that they do a lot of stuff, and then the men just don't feel they have to be efficient or contribute in the domestic sphere. And the way she said it, and the sort of casual insight she dropped, really sort of resonated with me, because when I look to a lot of women in my family who are just super type A, but may not be working out of the home necessarily, they just run stuff, and therefore the men feel they don't have to. But with a twin pregnancy, I knew that I have only one pair of hands and we're going to have 2 kids, so we need all hands on deck, and many others that are not exactly in this marriage. And so my parents came down. My parents stayed with us for the first 3 months. My husband became super adept at everything that he could do. I guess except breastfeeding, he knew everything, could do it all. I hired a really amazing nanny. She was like a baby whisperer, so again luck. Got very lucky. And she stayed with me. She came for like 2 months and stayed with me for 2 years. She was like just a supremely gentle and amazing pair of hands by my side. And I just put one step in front of the other and asked for help whenever I needed it, whenever I felt I was drowning. And
when did you get back to work after you delivered? Was it from November 1st?
So actually, it's funny you ask. I was virtually, that time Zoom was not a thing. So I was dialed in from my cell phone to an investment committee conference call on another deal 2 weeks after I gave birth. So I had started checking email and stuff 2 weeks after I had given birth. I'd spend a couple of hours a day sort of addressing whatever I needed to address. But I did not work on any new transactions for the first 4.5 months. So I was only in maintenance mode, because I didn't want to be a roadblock.
Yeah, it's very important to balance your health with your work.
Absolutely.
That's where the question of work-life balance comes in. And my question is that, is life as a private equity investor and
is it balanced?
It's not balanced, that we know. That's why I ask, is it hectic?
I think yes, it is. It is really fun too. I think with any demanding career, not just private equity, with any demanding career, there's a certain level of intensity and commitment that will come with that role and that opportunity and that privilege. And I think at every point in your life, work and life may not have the same weightage, has been my experience. Because till I became a mother, I never felt I was at a disadvantage in a work setting. I felt, we may have different styles, but I can compete on an even footing because I have experience and I can put in effort, and it's great. But when I became pregnant, I was working on a cement transaction at Goldman, and I had to travel to, I hadn't yet told anybody because it was in the high risk phase. I think they advise you to tell people only after 8 weeks, and I was in my 6th week, and it was a twin pregnancy, so my gynec was anyway quite nervous, and she's like, don't tell anybody. But they told me to travel to Calcutta and then take a 2-day trip around various cement plants, and there was no way I could do this, right? So for the first time in, up until that point, what had been like a very smooth ride on the gender front, because I just felt I could do everything, there's no difference. I was confronted with gender as an important variable in this decision, and I chose to tell my boss early because I didn't want him to think I was shirking work, and I felt, and I also requested him not to tell anybody else because I was in this high risk phase, and I said, I'm really sorry, but I can't do this. And I potentially cannot travel for the balance part of my pregnancy as well. And he was super understanding. He was like, absolutely, you should not travel if this is the situation, right? And so I think my sort of takeaway from that was, where family needs you, you have to make that a priority. And like you said, health has to be somewhat of a priority. I'd be lying if I said it's a high priority of mine right now, but if you're not in good health, you can't contribute in any sphere of your life to your satisfaction and advantage. And so, yes, life is chaotic, but life is also really fun, and I get to do this cool job, and I get to have these cute kids, and I think it's worth it. But it is a lot of effort.
Yeah. How many hours of working? I mean, how was it back then, and how is it now as a partner? Has it changed or almost the same?
The type of work has changed. What I do day to day has changed. The amount I do has, when I first joined Trifecta for those first 18 months, I was working like a summer analyst because we were 0 to 1, right? Like I said, this is the closest I will get to being an entrepreneur eventually. So we were all in day and night. It was COVID, so we had 8-hour Zooms, and then I would work on like deals in the night. So for that phase, it was manic. But I was having so much fun. I was high on adrenaline. But now with the market like this, deal activity has softened. I have more time to read. I've become a student of the venture capital industry now. I'm reading this book called The Power Law. I listen to a podcast at least every second day, if not every day, on how different great investors think, and have navigated different cycles. So I feel now I have the time to think and reflect and be more intentional about how I spend my day versus when you're in a frenzied phase of the industry where you just have to sort of keep pace with where the industry is moving. So it's not consistently manic. And I've learned to enjoy these periods because I feel I can learn more and I can learn different things, which hopefully will make me a better investor.
Right. I mean, everything in life becomes good when there's fun in the madness also.
Yes.
And you're one of the only people, who has spoke that I love my work so much and I have fun with it. And you said it so many times that it really reflects from, your aura, that how much you have loved what you've been doing so far. It's really difficult to get people to do it. I mean, so you actually are very lucky and very hardworking.
I am lucky. Thank you for agreeing with me.
Yeah, but now that you have seen, most phases of your life and career, what traits do you think a fresher needs versus a person who is getting promoted at principal level needs and a partner needs?
This is a very good question because you asked me about the work quantum, right, when I was an analyst and now, and I said the work character is also very different. I think at entry level, there's a job description that comes with whatever it is you're taking up, right? And I think you have to be bang up excellent on those dimensions. So if for investing that is being good at Excel, being current with trends in the venture capital industry, networking with bunch of entrepreneurs at very early stage, so as the companies grow and mature, you have a pipeline. All of these are requirements for being entry level in venture capital. I think as you mature through the ranks, judgment becomes very important. Being able to see parallels between situations that have happened in the past, being able to connect that to what you're seeing now, bringing insight from unrelated industries maybe, all of that becomes very important. So there's a layer, but the base of the pyramid never goes away.
Right.
You gotta, maybe you're not in the weeds of Excel, but I'm still reading. Like I said, I've become a student of venture at 40 now. Like I'm loving reading about the history of venture, those early deals. Like you were saying, it's so interesting to read about. It is so interesting to read about how those early deals happened. And why they happened and how they ultimately turned out. So I think it's almost layering on at every level, while also maybe giving up some of the day-to-day of what the previous level demanded. Right? So I can still be in Excel, and I am sometimes. I still quickly make a model if you have to make a quick go, no-go decision. It's not a full-blown investment committee. But I have, two very strong capability members who will do that better than me now. And so, they do it. But then going through that in depth with them, understanding the levers for this business, all that will continue. But I think the principal layer, there's a certain judgment of how a business model will evolve, how a founder will react. deal making. Right? Like you said, like is it easy to get into every deal? Absolutely not. It's like you know, you have to do every possible good thing for the founder to, in good companies, to have you be perceived as valuable to that transaction. I think all those start to become a little more important as you go up the ranks. And then I think at partner level, it's also in many ways having a point of view on investments, of course, founders, of course, but also the state of play, right? Where's this industry going to go? Where can I get new pools of capital to come into? Here, I feel in a small way, I'm also one of the many spokespeople for India as an investment destination, because there are so many global investors who talk to me, and they don't just ask me about Trifecta. They like tell me about the history of venture in India. So I think you broaden out more and multi-hat more as you go up. And sometimes the satisfaction of a job well done when you are in the analysis and execution phase of your career doesn't often come because you're playing a very long game over here, right? You're not sort of judged on, you know, how good was the model, right? Or it's like there's no great job lab for like 7 years. Hopefully that will come. But report cards take a very long time to come. And so I think the difference in mentality of the playing the long game versus, you know, when you're young, you're like very focused on the micro tasks at hand. I think that has also been like a transition, and I'm very much becoming. By no means do I feel, you know, on all these dimensions I've sort of reached where I would like to be.
That sense of instant gratification at fresher level hits you really different.
Isn't it? Totally, right? I miss that sometimes. I'm like, dude, I miss the, you know, great job on that memo, like great job on that model.
Because once you become senior, like you're the only one who's responsible.
But you have to tell yourself, great job today on this call.
But with that also comes great responsibility for your team members, you know, as to how you're making them do better each day. So how you as a team leader manage your team? What are some of your leadership style traits if we were to know about it?
I think my sort of favorite, I guess, leadership lesson came from this very senior woman at Goldman who said, look, whatever you do, someone is going to have a problem with it. So the easiest thing to do is just unapologetically just be yourself. Then you're not disappointing yourself, right? So I feel my style of leadership is authentic. I think I'm genuinely an excitable person, as you've seen. So I'm very invested in my colleagues. I love to see them like fired up about what they're doing. So I try to match their interests with what they're working on. It's a big joy for me to see people grow in their careers and succeed. So I spend a fair bit of time mentoring, making sure that they get whatever it is they need for that sort of next milestone to be achieved and met. And I think in general I'm like just super energetic, so sometimes that can be exhausting for my team. But I think those are some of my go-to.
Any books from where you have learned some of your leadership lessons?
So actually the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the recently deceased Supreme Court Justice in the US, has been my biggest inspiration for leadership. To see how somebody who grew up Jewish in New York with very little financial means, lost her mother when she was in high school, to ascend to the topmost court in the country, and the way she sort of continued to make excellence and thought leadership such a big piece of how she conducted herself has been my biggest. So her life has been my biggest leadership lesson. Like I have watched every interview there is of her. I have read, there are 3 books that have come out on her. I've read all of them. There's like a movie on her life and her legacy. I've seen that. Like I'm so inspired by how she has led. And led a whole generation of women to believe and dream and think they can succeed.
I mean, success stories also inspire, but it's the hardships that inspires us more, because it really teaches us how you also sail through tough times. But having said that, speaking on tough times, I'm sure that sometimes you might be having to do conflict management with the team.
Yes, within, outside.
So how do you really manage with conflicts happening at workplace?
I think the good part with a small team, and as you know, I've been in small teams now for the last 15 years, is that there's no place to hide, right? There's no large organization where you can say, oh, I don't really like this person, so we're not going to work together. And so, at least in our team, we're just very open with each other. And we do our best to state views in a factual manner, not make it personal, but yet not sugarcoat whatever it is we're truly feeling. So it's very common for my partner Sandeep to say on a transaction that I may be talking about, I really just don't like that company. And it will be just a very honest, open conversation. Or there'll be something he's looking at and I'll say, hey, I've seen XYZ in this sub-segment of the industry and therefore I really, I'm worried about progressing on this transaction. So we're very open with each other. We try our best not to take things personally. We have, within the four of us in the equity team, a policy that whatever it is that's bothering anybody, we will surface it openly. We will talk about it. And sometimes when you're so busy, there's so much work to be done that there's also less time to sit and brew and ponder and wonder why someone said something. Right? So I almost think sometimes tiny teams just end up having instant conflict resolution because you need to move forward. You need to take that decision. So that's sort of how we've done it. So the principles are, you are honest, you surface things early, you try not to make things personal, and if you're still uncomfortable about something, then just bring it up in the small group forum.
Do you mind telling us about some difficult conversation that you have had and how did you navigate through it, just as an example for us to learn from? Of course, without taking names.
I'm like, I still have to work with everybody. No, just kidding. So maybe I can talk about it from the earlier part of my career.
That's the safer bet.
Very much. And like I said, I take a considered approach. There was this co-worker of mine at my hedge fund, and he was a really competitive guy. And he and I were the two associates in our class. The fund only took 2 people every year on average, and so it was 2 of us. And I felt every good transaction that was potentially there to be given to one of us, he would always want it. And I would always be like, okay, it's fine. Let him have it if he wants it. I'll work on the other thing. And there was one particular transaction though where I felt I had a lot of relevant experience, but I was still, like, I had only worked in the US for 2 years. I was still not as confident as I am today in the ability to go and confront somebody. And so I did a lot of work on my own before going and telling the senior partners that I want to work on this. But I did it openly. I did it in front of him. I said, I know he wants to work on this, but I think I should work on this for these reasons. And he was pretty upset with me for publicly just doing that. But he also knew I was honest, right? I didn't do anything untoward. And I said also on the last 3 transactions, he got first dibs, so I'd like to express interest on this one for myself. And I think that taught me 2 things. It taught me that sometimes, even though you don't have to prepare, preparation gives you confidence. Because if I hadn't prepared, but I was just asking for it, I felt I would have been hesitant in my own approach. And Shabana Azmi actually said in one interview something really beautiful. She said preparation means you respect the other person's time. And so from that small victory, and I got to work on it, and I was very excited, and I got to travel to Hawaii, and it was so super. As like a young person to go on a private jet to Hawaii is like, whoa.
You went on a private jet?
Yeah, for this transaction due diligence. That was actually not the reason I did for it though. But it taught me that advocating for something you want to do is super important because the world is not doling out favors, right? And you have to have a voice, but you also have to be clever about confidence in that situation. And some people are just naturally very confident. I feel I'm much more confident when I'm armed with more information.
That's true. But I feel that women generally tend to have they tend to hold grudge for a longer time than men do. I mean, you'll see men arguing and then the next minute they're having a drink together. But that's how we're biologically different and should appreciate.
So, holding a grudge is an interesting term. I think, and I won't generalize, but I'll speak for myself, right? I think I tend to be a little more sensitive on average to how other people are feeling than some of the men I've worked with. And the good part of that is that you can build relationships and trust quickly if you are more empathetic. But the flip side of that is you will also feel upset if someone does something you do not expect them to do or you do not think is warranted or appropriate. So I think the good part of being in this stereotype of women, which is a little bit overthinking, a little bit sensitive, a little bit empathetic, is that you remember things for a longer time and you also feel things maybe a little more deeply than the counterpart in that equation. And I think we should do our best to forsake the grudge without forsaking the good, right? The good is you're able to connect better with people because you're attuned to what they're saying. The good is that you're able to remember and relate in a new conversation because you were paying attention and listening when someone told you something 6 months ago. So all that is the good of that stereotype. The way I try to keep myself honest in these situations is I check intent. If I feel something was said with malintent, then I make it an issue. If I think something can go in the bucket of stupidity and be ignored, I do that.
I think that is something that we all will be learning from after we hear this. It's very important to distinguish between what's gem and what's trash.
Totally.
Because sometimes we go into that mining field and think that this is also a diamond, but then later we realize, okay, kohli hai recipe. But I think we can move with the rapid fire round.
Oh my god!
It's the most exciting part. But before that, I just remembered one more question. Sometimes did you ever face this at work where you did the same amount of work as your male counterpart did, but his work was recognized more, maybe because he spoke more about it and you maybe hesitated to speak about your work?
Yes, I have had that happen to me. I've also had mansplaining happen to me, which is, you say something and someone else explains it back to you and you're like, hey, I just said that, but didn't hear it. So I have had that. I think it's actually prompted me to become a better communicator and also just make points when they come to you as opposed to waiting for the perfect and most opportune time. But yes, that has happened to me. I don't think it's a myth. I think on average women do hesitate to jump in and may face this sort of situation where there is not equal recognition for equal work if you're not as vocal about it.
But why do you think do women have this issue of not being very vocal and staying conservative?
So I think I've read about something called the likability paradox, which is actually the more successful women are, the less likable on average they're perceived to be. And I've also grown up in a social construct where women were generally more agreeable and more considered to be the person who will be the emotional glue and who will soothe various, ruffled feathers and sort of be that person. And I actually like that role. I play that role to some extent. But I also think that in a professional setting where you want to be recognized for your efforts and work, you have to learn in your own way to advocate for it. Because I think the reality is that's what's effective. And I think sometimes these traits are like more masculine and feminine. There are men and women who can exhibit both of them. And in certain workplaces, that is not as important. And then it's fine. You don't have to push yourself out of your comfort zone to make that happen. Like for example, at Goldman, there were a bunch of men who would do Pine Street, and I'm sure women, but I know of a few men who would go for Pine Street training because their juniors would complain about them and say, so-and-so is not a great boss and not empathetic enough and doesn't understand my situation. Similarly, if there are women who feel like they would benefit from coaching, mentoring, or just the ability to get over the likability paradox, why not, right? Both traits are helpful and not in different situations.
This actually reminds me of an article by Harvard Business Review. They said that as long as we associate masculinity, being at the senior positions with masculinity, we are not going to see enough women.
Absolutely, and I think it's great that there are so many role models of women excelling globally in very diverse fields. Because then like my twin boys, they asked me the other day, Mumma, you were a small boss or a big boss? And I said, I'm a very small boss. And my husband's like, no, Mumma is a real boss, like she runs a fund. And so I was just thinking, in their world, women run funds. They are not questioning it because it's so natural for them to accept, because they've seen me working since they knew it was a thing. And so I think slowly we are creating a more even playing field with all of our stories. But like I said, change takes time. And in the interim, I think as an individual, whatever it is you want to work on to be effective in your context, you should work on. Like I'm very inspired. So this Dr. Atul Gawande, who's a leading sort of medical doctor, and he said, why do only athletes have coaches? I want a coach. I want someone following me to help me be a better surgeon. And I just thought, what a beautiful thought. Like, won't we all benefit from somebody helping us be better in the areas that today we feel are holding us back from being the best we can be at work?
Absolutely. But I'm glad that you have shared your story, because it is going to help a lot of other young women who look up to being where you are.
But
we'll move into our last segment of the conversation, which is the rapid fire.
Very scared for this.
But quickly, starting with which is one of your most proud moments so far in life?
This is a very good question. So actually, when both my twins were told independently, they're in different classes, during PTA, the class teachers were giving feedback, and they said both of them are really kind and helpful and are very sweet to the younger children in the class. These two are among the oldest in the class. I was so happy, because I think as a working mother, I don't think I beat myself up with guilt too much, but there's always the question of, am I doing justice to this privilege of being a parent that I've got? And I think, that just, I was so happy. I told Arjun, my husband, I was like, let's go celebrate. And he's like, why? What happened? I was like, we're raising kind kids. That's amazing. Let's do it. So I think recently that was my proudest.
I think kindness is one of the most important characteristics that we all need to nurture for lifetime, and there's no right time to do it. But moving on, what was your most difficult decision that you had to make in life?
Ooh. I think many, but leaving Goldman for Trifecta was among those big ones where, they always say Goldman has convening power, right? Someone from Goldman calls and, someone will take that call because of the firm, not because of the individual.
Yeah.
I felt now I'm going out there and trying to build a fund, trying to do the 0 to 1 journey in my own way. And in that sense, betting on myself along with, my partners who were betting on me.
Yeah.
So I think that was a very hard decision.
And did this decision to build a fund of your own made you shift to Trifecta, or were there other contributing factors?
I think there were 3 contributing factors. One was tech was, in my view, going to be a multi-decadal, attractive investment category. Current slump notwithstanding, I still stand by multi-decadal. The second was just the people. I loved how high integrity, high energy, high intellect my Trifecta partners were, and I loved the team as well. And third, I think just the chance to build my own track record from scratch as an investor. These were the things. I said, I'm past the phase where I need like a certain sort of comfort in my day-to-day. My kids are old enough. I've saved enough for them to go to college. I'll never do this if I don't do this now.
That's right. But it's a brave call that you took, because
it's been an amazing journey, so I'm really grateful.
But what was the most difficult part while you were fundraising and going from your 0 to 1?
The most difficult part, hearing no and not taking it personally and doing the next pitch with as much enthusiasm. Most difficult part. It's like I kept telling myself, it's not a no, it's just a not now. Let's keep going.
That's an optimistic way to look at it.
Only way to be if you're like raising money.
But what was the most negative feedback that you got while raising money?
I think a lot of it, because we had no investments yet, they couldn't really comment on a portfolio. So the most negative feedback we got was, we think there are too many people doing investing in early stage, and then we'd be like, but we're not doing early stage, we're doing growth stage, and then they're like, oh, but then there's all these private equity funds, and then we'd say, but they're not focused on tech, they're doing many other things, they're doing industrials and pharma, and so a lot of we just don't like this category, we just don't like this industry. So because it wasn't so personal, maybe it was easier to handle. And also our fund got raised in record time because of that very buoyant liquidity environment.
What was the time?
We launched in May. We reached our targeted amount by December.
That's it? And what was the amount?
1,500 crores.
Okay. It's not bad at all.
It's insane. So it way surpassed our own expectations.
But did it get oversubscribed?
So we then, after we raised that initial amount, said we'll keep it open for 375 crores more, because we wanted to make sure that if there's more money coming in, let it come in. So it's still open, but we got so lucky with the liquidity environment because people were also like willing to make, quick decisions.
And I'm sure you must have reached out to many LPs like you did to 40 funds while you were about
many multiples of that number.
And who was your first LP, if you remember? What category were they in?
We spoke to a very large corporate treasury. So it's a very large, well-known Indian business group, and they have invested in us from corporate treasury.
Understood. And when is the second fund coming now?
Let me come back to you.
How much has it been deployed already?
Half. So we have time.
And how many investments are you now looking more to?
Maybe 6 more investments in this fund.
Okay. Quickly, if you could just explain the sectors and check sizes that you will be deploying.
So we deploy on average about 100 crores per transaction. So around, give or take, 13-15 million. We can do anything from Series B onwards. So anything that's firmly in the growth stage with good product market fit, strong unit economics comes in our playground. And our fund life is 7 years on the outer limit, and sectors are anything within India tech is of fair game and interest.
And what kind of equity percentage would you expect?
Usually it's single digit ownership, so not sort of the classic private equity, control deals. But we have good rights commensurate with that ownership, and in all cases very good relationship with management.
Yeah, and what exit strategies would you look at?
We think there will be a fair number of IPOs in this 7-year period. We also think there will be a bunch of strategic activity. And we're also seeing a lot of sponsors like sovereign wealth funds get interested in this asset class.
How does the investment process look like for a VC fund as to when you invest money, how do you expect returns, and when you do, what do you do of that money? How do you really claim profits as a fund?
Understood. So we invest typically in the first 3 years of the fund. As and when those investments get liquidated, it could either be you sell in an IPO, it could be you sell to another investor, the company gets acquired. As and when we get those proceeds, we return them to our investors. We will not reinvest them in the fund. And ultimately, unless you deliver a 10% return on the average fund, we don't get any profit share.
Oh, so that's the hurdle rate. Okay.
So that's how we've structured.
Okay, that's nice. The second last question, and then the last. What are the top 3 qualities that you look for in a founder before putting money in or putting a bet on them?
I think passion is number 1. 2 is there's something called founder problem fit, which is why is this founder a good person to solve this problem? And doing extensive ref checks around the founder is the second piece that we pay a lot of attention to. And then the third piece is, resilience. I know this is hard to sort of quantify, but how do they behave in tough times? And we have this luxury as a growth to late stage investor, because each founder would have seen at least one business cycle, right? So how do they behave then? How do they face adversity? Are they good about communication with investors? Are they honest? Do they have a let's keep our eyes on the long-term prize mentality? Because I think being an entrepreneur is a very long-term game. And things seldom go the way you plan. So how do they navigate those uncertain times? I think as a growth investor is our biggest. So that resilience in uncertainty is, I'd underline that.
Right. And lastly, since you've had a splendid career in investing, if I may say so, what advice would you give to other people who are wanting to make a career in investing?
I think you get the privilege of being a lifelong learner, and that should excite you.
It should be a privilege for you in the first place.
Yes, absolutely, well said. Because there are other jobs in which maybe you can continue to be better at the same thing and be very successful. But in what we do, you have to be comfortable always being the person in the room with the least knowledge or information on that particular topic. Because the founder, this is their life's work. This is her or his life's work. They're all in. They'll always know more than you. And how do you quickly learn as much as you can, but then also have the ability to take a call with obviously less information than the founder and less insight than the founder. I think that, I find that to be a huge privilege, that I get to learn all these cool things.
And I've heard this from many leaders that less is more. And that's how you should be grateful for the fact that you know less and you can know more. But on that note, I really thank you for coming in. For
such a pleasure, Radhika. It was my absolute honor. Thank you so much for having me.